I need to stop and address something that has just happened with the weekend forecast, because what we were expecting 24 hours ago is no longer what we're looking at. The models have shifted in a way that changes the entire picture for the next 72 hours, and if you were planning your weekend based on what we were saying yesterday, you need to hear this. New data came in overnight, and it's telling us that the combination of Arctic cold, a fast-moving snow system, and a secondary weather event are going to overlap in ways that were not in the forecast as of yesterday evening. This is one of those situations where the atmosphere is moving faster than our models were capturing, and now that we have a clearer picture, the impacts are looking more significant than we anticipated. We're talking about record-breaking cold pushing deep into the southeast, a clipper system bringing snow across the Ohio Valley and into the northeast, dangerous freezing conditions extending all the way into Florida, and then a separate system bringing rain and storms back into the south by the end of the weekend. I'm going to break all of this down for you region by region, and I'm going to give you a timeline so you know exactly when things are going to start affecting your area. Let me start with what's happening right now across the southeast, because this is where some of the most dangerous conditions are already developing. As of this morning, February 3rd, we have Arctic air that has already pushed well south of where we expected it to be at this point. Temperatures across Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina are sitting in the 20s and low 30s, and they are continuing to drop. Atlanta is currently sitting at 28 degrees, and we're expecting overnight lows tonight to drop into the single digits in some areas. Birmingham, Alabama is at 31 degrees and falling. Charlotte is at 26 degrees. These are not normal temperatures for the first week of February in these cities, and the fact that they're already this cold tells me that this Arctic air mass is performing at the high end of what the models were suggesting. What concerns me about this setup is that the ground across much of the southeast is still damp from recent rain events, and with temperatures dropping this rapidly, we're going to see surface moisture freeze over. This creates the potential for black ice, which is one of the most dangerous road conditions because it's essentially invisible. Drivers can't see it, and by the time they realize they've lost traction, it's too late. If you are driving anywhere in the southeast this evening or tonight, you need to be extremely cautious, particularly on bridges, overpasses, and shaded roadways where black ice is most likely to form first. This isn't a situation where you see ice and snow on the ground and you adjust accordingly. This is a situation where the road looks completely normal and you hit a patch of ice without any warning. Now, let me talk about the Clipper system that's moving through the central and eastern United States, because this is the snow event that's going to be affecting a large number of people over the next 24 to 36 hours. We have an Alberta Clipper that's currently positioned over the northern plains, and it's tracking southeast at a pretty rapid pace. These systems move fast, which means the snow event is going to be relatively short-lived for any given location. But they can still produce meaningful accumulation, especially when they're moving over very cold air. And that's exactly what we have right now. The surface temperatures across the Ohio Valley and the Midwest are already well below freezing, which means any snow that falls is going to stick immediately. The Clipper is expected to bring snow across a corridor stretching from northern Illinois and Indiana through Ohio and back into western Pennsylvania and southern New York. If you're in Cincinnati, Columbus, or Cleveland, you're going to start seeing snow develop this evening, with the heaviest snow arriving overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning, February 4th. Accumulations are going to vary depending on exactly where the heaviest bands set up, but right now I'm looking at 3 to 6 inches for most of the Ohio Valley, with some isolated areas potentially picking up 8 inches if you get caught under a persistent band. This might not sound like a huge number, but remember, any snow on already frozen ground is going to create immediate travel problems, and road crews are still dealing with the aftermath of the previous storms. Moving into the northeast, the Clipper is going to continue tracking east, and areas like southern New York, northern New Jersey, and Connecticut are going to see snow develop during the late evening hours on February 3rd into the early morning hours on February 4th. The totals are probably going to be on the lower end here, 2 to 4 inches, but again, with temperatures so far below normal, this snow is going to stick and it's going to make morning commutes very difficult. Now, I need to address Florida, because the situation down there is developing into something that is genuinely unusual. We are looking at the potential for widespread frost and freeze conditions across all of northern Florida, and isolated freeze conditions reaching as far south as central Florida. Tallahassee is currently forecast to drop into the low to mid-20s overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. Jacksonville is looking looking at temperatures in the upper 20s. Gainesville could drop into the mid to upper 20s as well. And even Orlando, which rarely sees temperatures below the mid 30s, is looking at the possibility of dropping into the low 30s. For Florida, this is a significant event. The agricultural industry in particular is going to be closely monitoring this, because even a brief period of temperatures in the mid-20s can cause serious damage to citrus crops, vegetable farms, and other temperature-sensitive agriculture. But it's not just agriculture that's at risk. Residents who are not accustomed to dealing with freezing temperatures need to take precautions. Exposed pipes can freeze and burst when temperatures drop below 28 degrees for an extended period. If you have outdoor faucets, you need to insulate them or shut them off. If you have plants that are sensitive to frost, you need to cover them or bring them indoors. And if you're driving in northern Florida tomorrow morning, be aware that black ice is a real possibility on roadways, especially in the early morning hours before the sun has a chance to warm things up. Let me now talk about something that might seem counterintuitive given all the cold I've been discussing, and that's the rain and storm system that's going to move back into the south later this weekend. As we move into Saturday afternoon and evening, February 4th, we're going to see a shift in the weather pattern across the southern states. The Arctic air is going to begin retreating slightly, and a new system is going to start pushing moisture back up out of the Gulf of Mexico. This moisture is going to interact with the remnants of the cold air, and it's going to produce a band of rain and thunderstorms across portions of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Now, this might not sound like a big deal after everything else we've been talking about, but there are a couple of things that make this worth paying attention to. First, the rain that falls on frozen or near frozen ground is going to create additional ice hazards on roadways. If temperatures are hovering right around the freezing point, which is what we're looking at for parts of the Deep South on Saturday afternoon, rain can transition into freezing rain without much warning. Second, some of these storms could produce heavy rain in a short period of time. And with the ground already saturated from previous weather events, localized flooding becomes a concern, particularly in areas with poor drainage. The reason this system is developing has to do with what's happening with the jet stream. Over the past 48 hours, we've seen the jet stream undergo a significant shift in its pattern. The jet stream has been running in a very amplified pattern, with deep troughs and high ridges, and this is what's been allowing the Arctic air to plunge so far south. But now, we're seeing the jet stream begin to flatten out slightly over the southern tier of the country, which is allowing moisture from the Gulf to push back north more easily. This doesn't mean the cold is going away. The Arctic air is still dominant across most of the country, but it does mean that we're going to see a more active weather pattern developing along the boundary between the cold air and the Gulf moisture. And that boundary is where we're going to see the most significant weather activity over the next few days. Let me give you a region-by-region breakdown of who is most at risk and when. Starting with the southeast, the highest risk period is tonight through tomorrow morning, February 3rd into 4th. This is when temperatures are at their coldest, black ice is most likely, and freeze damage to crops and infrastructure is most probable. Georgia, the Carolinas, and northern Florida are the areas of greatest concern during this window. For the Ohio Valley and the Midwest, the highest risk period is tonight through tomorrow morning as well, but the risk here is primarily snow-related. Cincinnati, Columbus, Indianapolis, and surrounding areas need to be prepared for snow that's going to make travel very difficult. For the Northeast, the risk window is shorter, primarily overnight tonight, but the snow that falls is going to stick around for a while given how cold it's going to remain. For Florida specifically, the highest risk window is tomorrow morning, February 4th, when temperatures will be at their lowest. Agricultural interests need to be taking action now if they haven't already. For the South, including Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, the risk shifts to Saturday afternoon and evening when the rain and storm system moves through and the potential for freezing rain and localized flooding increases. Let me walk you through the weekend timeline more specifically. Tonight, February 3rd, temperatures will continue to drop across the southeast while snow begins to develop across the Ohio Valley. The Clipper system will be moving through the Midwest and into the eastern states. Overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning is when the coldest temperatures will be recorded across Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Tomorrow morning, February 4th, will be the time when black ice is most dangerous across the southeast, and morning commuters need to be especially cautious. By tomorrow afternoon, the Clipper will have moved out to sea, and the snow event will be over for most areas. However, the cold will persist, and any snow on the ground is going to remain frozen. Saturday, February 5th is when the rain and storm system begins to move into the southern states. Expect rain and thunderstorms across Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi during the afternoon and evening hours. The freezing rain threat will be most significant along the boundary where cold air and warm, moist air are colliding, which will be somewhere across Tennessee and northern Alabama. By Sunday, February 6th, the storm system will have moved east and will be transitioning back into a quieter pattern for a brief window before the next system develops. The power grid and transportation infrastructure across much of the country are going to be under stress over the next 72 hours. Freezing conditions across the southeast are going to create ice accumulation on power lines and trees, which can lead to outages even without significant precipitation. If you're in an area that's already experienced power outages from previous storms and you haven't had power restored yet, this incoming cold is going to make that situation significantly more dangerous. Indoor temperatures drop fast when there's no heat and it's this cold outside. For drivers, the message is simple. If you don't have to be on the road tonight or tomorrow morning, stay home. Black ice is invisible, and it forms fastest on the surfaces you're least likely to think about. Bridges, overpasses, underpasses, and shaded sections of highway. If you do have to drive, leave extra time, reduce your speed, and increase your following distance. And if you see any patches of road that look slightly shiny or reflective, treat them as ice until you know otherwise. Looking beyond this weekend, I want to reiterate that this cold pattern is not going away. We're still in the early stages of what is shaping up to be a very persistent and brutal stretch of winter weather. The next 7 to 10 days are going to see continued below normal temperatures across much of the eastern United States, and there are additional storm systems developing that we're going to be tracking closely. Winter is not close to being over. The pattern we're in right now is one that historically produces multiple rounds of cold and snow, and we're likely to see that play out over the coming weeks. I will continue to update you as this situation develops. Thank you for trusting me with your weather information. Stay safe, stay warm, and plan accordingly for the next 72 hours. I'll see you in the next forecast.